Hello, just friends. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. And I have observed that last few videos, you guys are really liking the series that is chess tactics. And so far, we have covered about pinning, we have covered about line clearance, and deflection, and other tactics. So this one, we're gonna focus on interference, another beautiful tactic. So let's get ready and look at some wonderful examples. Again, this is going to be full of sacrifices, so you guys are going to love this. These are a great example I have personally selected. So let's get straight into it. White to play and win the game. So like always, go ahead, pause the video. In this video, I'm going to show you about 5 to 6 really great examples of interference, and we'll understand what interference exactly is. So pause the video and try to find the move that white should play. All right, let's start from understanding what is an interference tactic. Interference is more, to put it in simple words, it is basically line closing. We have looked at line clearance, in which we have to open up a file, a diagonal, or a particular square. But in line closing, you have to close the diagonal or the file or a particular square. So basically, you're gonna block the communication, lines of communication, and that is today's topic, interference. You have to interfere in the defense. So if you observe this position, you will notice that queen f7 would have been a checkmate, but of course the queen is defending. So if we can interfere in the defense of this queen, we are gonna win. And this brings us to the solution, which is pretty much, I think most of you would have guessed it. There is not only this weakness, but also the diagonal over here is kind of weak. The king is very badly placed, and that motivates us to play rook to e7. And now this is a wonderful rook sacrifice and a very strong interference tactic. Now let's have a look at what is the threat. The threat obviously is to capture the queen, and the bigger threat is to give queen f7 checkmate, of course, as all of you would have noticed. Now if bishop takes, then this obviously succeeds. Queen f7 would be a mate, because the thing is, after the bishop captures, we have successfully interfered in the defense of the queen, and in that case we are going to give a mate. Going back, in this position he can also play queen takes rook, but now you can see again the queen over here, queen on d7, was actually guarding the d5 square, and now that it has been deflected away, you're going to play queen d5 check. There is no option for the king, so queen has to block, and there comes a wonderful checkmate over there. All right, so rook e7. What else can black try? In fact, he can try knight to e5. This is the best move for black, but even here we take the queen. He's gonna capture. We're gonna capture back. White is a full piece up, and this is gonna drop. This is gonna drop. A lot of pieces are hanging. So, and of course the pitiful rook on h8 says a lot about himself. So basically, white is gonna absolutely win this position no matter what. So this was an example, and the star move was rook to e7, sacrificing the rook in order to interfere with the defenses of black. And you can see this is basically, more or less in simple words, it is line closing, cutting the lines of communication. All right, let's have a look at our second wonderful example. So here is a second example. As you can all see, this is very similar to the first one, and it basically has something in common. So like always, think about it. What are the soft spots in the position? What are the targets in the black position? How we can attack them, and who is the piece that is defending? So basically, the questions you're gonna ask yourself is, which is the black piece that's defending the square, and how are we gonna interfere in his defense? This one, I don't think you guys will have any problem at all to find. So like always, pause the video and find the answer for white. All right, there comes a brilliant move. Again, a rook sacrifice, rook to d7. Now what is the point behind this? If we just go back, we'll understand that the pawn on h7 is kind of weak. It's a target. The pawn on f7 is also weak. You can see the queen is attacking, knight is attacking. There is a lot of pressure on all of these points, but currently knight defends, the king defends, and the queen defends. So currently he's able to defend, but if we can interfere with his defense, then that's going to be a problem. For example, if the knight moves, then h7 drops. If the queen is kind of interfered with, then f7 is attacked. So something like that can happen, and rook to d7 exactly does that. Now of course the rook is protected from the knight. Knight gives him adequate protection. We are also threatening to take the queen. So basically the idea is to play queen into f7, or even stronger is bishop into h7, as we are going to see. So let's have a look at bishop takes d7, the obvious move. Now what are we going to do? The point is, now the queen's defense has been interfered with. The queen is no longer protecting the f7 square. First we are going to capture bishop takes h7, very strong move. If the king goes on h8, then knight takes f7. You can see the queen no longer guards, so knight takes f7 is possible, and knight f7 is not just possible, but it's actually checkmate. So going bad, of course he will capture here with the knight, but in that case queen f7 again. Thanks to the rook sacrifice, we are able to do this. King goes in the corner, and knight to g6 is a very pretty checkmate. What a wonderful checkmate. Going back, at this point after the move rook to d7, even queen d7 is possible. In fact, it turns out that this is the best move for black, although his position is still lost. You just capture the queen. Thank you for the queen. Bishop takes, and now there are several continuations over here. For example, if knight takes over here, you can see h7 is still a problem. Bishop takes h7. First I would say anything is fine. First you can also capture, but okay, let's say bishop h7, king here just takes and a check, and more material will drop, and you obviously have two connected pass pawns. A rook over here, that's too much for winning. And of course after queen d7, knight d7, bishop d7, then we can play bishop into f6, g takes, and queen into c5. Again we are attacking the rook. We have two connected pass pawns, a very strong bishop which keeps an eye on both the sides. At the same time we have a rook on f1. That is more than enough pieces, and black is definitely not very good. He is not coordinated, and the king is super exposed. Even if you have enough material for the queen, the king's position really matters. If the king is safe, like it was in the game of the century, then you can go for you can ask for compensation. But if the king is exposed, then you can't really fight the queen, because the queen is a all powerful unit. She doesn't have to coordinate with any other piece. She is fully powerful and well equipped to fight alone as well. So let's jump on to our third example, again full of sacrifices. So here is our third example, a really interesting one. Again, you can see black's defenses are black's kingside pawns are shattered all over, and more or less it's possible for us to create a checkmating attack. But right now, our queen is kind of unable to capture the pawn on e5, and that is the key. That's a hint, a little bit of hint I'm gonna give you. White to play and find the interference move that white should play and win the game. Again, look for sacrifices, of course. All right, here comes the brilliant move. We would very much like to capture, and then after king f7, queen f6 would be a mate. But of course, the queen defends. So the idea obviously is you're going to interfere in this defense, and that's why, of course, you don't want to put a queen. You're going to put your rook over here, which interferes with the defense of the e5 pawn, and basically this is winning. Let's give me a very bad example. A5, a very bad move for black, but it actually shows us what the idea of white is. White would capture. Only one square for the king, thanks to the knight and the bishop. The king can't really go anywhere, so king f7, and there comes a checkmate. So that's the basically idea. You would very much like to capture the pawn on e5 and checkmate. So that's the main critical idea. But this is gonna be very surprising. The best move for black is to play queen b6, and then something like takes c7. Now the pawn will be going forward. In fact, the pawn is super strong. He has to capture a knight now, because knight protects that square. So takes, rook c8. Now we're going to trap the rook. Rook will be more or less trapped over here, and these pawns are kind of very weak. So the rook is going to target them one after the other, and let's say rook into b6 and rook b8 is a huge threat that we are going to try, and basically it's all white that is going to win here. White is a huge advantage over here. But of course the main line is this one, where after rook d6 he can try bishop takes on e7. Now what should we do? It turns out that there is a brilliant move over here. You don't really need to capture the pawn anymore, but there's a brilliant move which starts with rook to d7. Now what's the point behind this? What's the idea? Of course the bishop cannot take our queen. That's the first thing, because we are pinning it. So our queen is actually safe. Our bishop and queen are totally safe. Can he capture? Yes, he can, but that will in fact lose a lot of material over here for him. Can you find the move for white? You can see his queen is attacked. Your queen can be saved. So queen into e5, you save your queen. King moves, and now you're going to capture his queen. That's the height of greediness, and that works. Of course, the bishop hangs, the pawn hangs as well. Very bad position for black. Going back after the move, rook to d7 here. He can also move with the queen, but in that case, you just take, let's say, king f8, and something like bishop h6 is super good for us after king over here. You can even capture the queen, or you can also go this. Let's say I just capture the queen, and then basically just rook g7, king h8, and this is obviously a winning position after the move c7, and white has the advantage of about 5 or 6 points up, and that's what Stockfish says. Basically, let me just give you an example. What is the threat? If rook c8, then we can play a3, and it is a zook swang. He doesn't have too many moves. Bishop c6, king f2, g5. Basically, the rook is hanging, the rook is trapped, the king is trapped, the bishop doesn't have a lot of squares to move. It is basically a very, very interesting zook swang. And of course, rook e7, and captures, captures. We are going to capture every single thing over here. These pawns are all weak. And obviously, our bishop is very strong. He can kind of come in the game and defend g7 and e5. We can defend everything in the position. So, the star move of the game was this over here when you played rook to d6, interfering with the queen's defense and totally crushing him in positional way as well as in a tactical way. All right, let's jump on to our fourth example now. Our fourth example is super interesting. We have a queen and a rook lined up on the g file, and we are nearly about to deliver him a checkmate. Unfortunately, the queen defends g2, the rook defends g1, and the bishop also defends f2 as well as g1. It looks like everything is protected. Even if you give a check, queen f3 can be played or rook f3 can be played, and basically he's able to more or less defend everything in the position. So three pieces defending. All you have to do, if we can interfere with one of the attacking pieces defender, then basically if we can interfere with one of them, we can create a checkmating threat. So how do we do it? It's black to play and find the winning idea. Again, it has to be a sacrifice, and a very interesting one. It should disrupt the entire harmony of white's pieces. Okay, there you go. The move is bishop to f2, sacrificing the bishop. But again, this creates a total chaos in the white position and does the job. So what's the point? Let me just give you an example. If he just ignores it and plays a very bad move like e6, the point is queen g1 check. The bishop supports the g1 square, protects it. After rook takes g1 is a mate. So that's basically the threat. Of course, white can try better. He can take with the rook, but then queen g1 again. You can see the bishop has been interfered. The rook has been interfered. They are not defending anymore. That's a mate. Bishop can capture, but this time the rook's defense has been interfered. The rook is no longer controlling f3 square, and that's why queen e4, check. Rook can no longer interfere. The only piece that can interfere is a queen, but then that is free. So there comes a mate, of course. So after the move bishop f2, there are other lines as well. Let me just see. Let's say queen c8, one of the checks, right? He can give a check. But after rook g8, it turns out that again the threat is to capture the queen. There's also queen e4, all kind of threats. If you move your queen, just queen e4 is directly a mate. So of course you have to play carefully here. It turns out that the only good move for white is to capture the rook, give up the queen. But after something like this, that's a double attack on the bishop, on the king. You can try rook g2, but after you move, bishop again hangs, pawn is hanging, this pawn is weak. Something like bishop d2 turns out into queen takes pawn, weak, and this is a passer. Bishop f2 can turn out badly again after queen c2 and capturing this pawn, getting another passed pawn. Basically, with such an exposed king, which can be attacked and checked anytime, and with only two pieces, it's black all over the game, and black is going to win this position pretty much with ease. All right, now let's have a look at a last example, equally wonderful one. Hello, so this is the last example, and just like many people have the habit of keeping the best, for example, the dessert for the end after having proper dinner, they keep the dessert. The best part of the food comes in the end. Similarly, in chess, I like to do the same. I like to keep the best puzzles in the end. So if you're here and if you're still watching, this example is really good one. White to play and find the interference move that white should play in order to win the game. So pause the video and find the move. All right, I think most of you would have understood the idea. It has to defend, it has to do with the interference. You can see the king is super weak over here, and we can try to do something around here. And how are they communicating? They're communicating directly on the d file. If we can interfere on the d file, maybe we can get the rook, maybe we can get the knight as well, or maybe we can give a back rank mate. So how do we do that? It turns out that we can simply play, we don't have to play rook d4, we can simply continue with knight d4, blocking the entire d file. This basically interferes, it closes the line, and you can see the threat obviously is knight takes knight. That will be winning up a piece. So he has to do something here. Let us look at the most obvious one. Knight takes, obviously queen takes is winning for us, for white. And then there are back rank threats. Knight is hanging, super bad position for black. Here you can also take with a pawn, but this is where you realize the idea. Now there is an interference in the on the d file. They are no longer supporting each other, and now you can basically play queen to d3. This time the rook is not defended, so there comes the double attack. And after, let's say, something like king f8, you just take this guy, and this is winning. At the same time, king h8, we can play the similar idea. Queen takes rook and winning the rook. At the same time, this pawn is pinned. We're gonna capture it. This is super good position for us. His back rank is weak, and of course rook is a rook. Rook against knight will be more or less winning for us. Of course this still has to be converted into a win, but of course this that is possible. You can play move like f3, you can capture the pawn, and it is all white that is going to win over here. So that was the example, and the move was knight to d4, interfering. Basically interference is all about line closing. If you just have to close the line, and once you close the line, the communication between the pieces has been stopped and they become very vulnerable. This time when you close the line with knight d4, the rook on d1 became vulnerable, and after pawn takes, you were able to exploit it because of check, and there you go. So hope you enjoyed all of these wonderful examples of interference. In fact, I have covered one chess problem of Sam Lloyd, which also has interference in it. I'm going to post the link in the description so you can check it out. That's a really good example of interference. So until next time, see you guys. Bye.